You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan, number 3 in the year, and I think number 32 in total, but who's counting? I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan, and joining me as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vibe. Squid, how are we doing today?
Well, we're doing pretty good, and we should be counting because we, once we hit 50, then we can go like, yeah, all right. No, I'm doing good. Little trip to the dentist this morning, and then I have another appointment Friday, getting my chiclets fixed up.
Yeah.
But, other than that, not a whole lot.
Well, we're excited to bring a guest on today that you didn't play with, but you played against certainly for a while, in Mike Krushelnyski. Got a very interesting story to tell.
Yeah, Mike was a good player. He was a big guy, had some good skill, and I never got to play with him, not in the NHL anyway, but we've played so many alumni games together, and just a great guy to play with, and he's funny and just a great guy to be around.
Yeah, he's done a number of charity things with us, so we know him from, and he's very generous with his time, as you are, and so we're excited to have Mike on today, but we'd be remiss now. The Leafs do play a couple hours after we're recording today. We're recording a day earlier because of traveling commitments for our producer, but they have 4 games under their belt. So what do you think so far?
Well, they're 3-1. I don't, other than the last game, I think, where they pretty much outshot Ottawa pretty good and, outplayed them from what I could tell for the most part. I don't know, a couple of different moves where Spezza was put on waivers. Dell, I didn't understand why he was waived. With the expansion draft coming up and that sort of thing, but I don't know, I guess they have their reasons for it. And, but you know what? They got a tough, well, I shouldn't say a tough team because they haven't won yet, I don't believe. Edmonton coming in tonight, but they're an explosive team. They can be if they get rolling, but their goaltending has been pretty weak so far this year. And I would imagine in Toronto, the big boys will feast on that, on the Leafs, I believe.
Well, the moves are made for cap space requirements because they're so tight, and they're allowed, because they did that and they cleared waivers, they're allowed, because of the injury to Robertson, then they're allowed to move players back and forth now as a result, and they can actually add a forward. So it was more done out of a technicality, and they knew this would happen at some point throughout the year, and Spezza was warned about it, and it's why they do have Michael Hutchinson also in relief, playing with Marlies for obviously exposure during the expansion draft, which will be coming up in about 4 or 5 months. So anyway,
there must be a certain amount of games that a goalie must have had to have played to be eligible to be unprotected. I would imagine.
I don't know that rule specifically, but I think you're right. But they can exploit. He played he was on the Leaf roster for half the year, so he's got the games for sure with Winnipeg. So he certainly has the games in Hutchinson. He'll be the candidate.
Whereas Dell might not have. Dell might not have had it.
Yeah, well, they didn't know that Robinson was going to get hurt like he did and throw them into that quandary right off the bat. So they kind of got caught because remember, they were going to use the backup goalie and let the starter sit right out of the rink altogether. So that kind of put him a little bit jam where they had to make that move. But it wasn't unexpected. And I don't think people were getting all excited about it, but it was calculated and it was expected and it happened. It was going to happen sooner or later. Now they have a little bit of flexibility and they can move some players around. So it's probably not all that bad. But as a result of
bad move. It's just,
no,
I was just curious. That's all, why they would make a move like that. But I assumed it was because of the salary cap.
That's correct. That's all it was. It was just salary cap move. Now, as far as the rest of the league is concerned, it's very early to start talking about positioning and maneuvering and all that kind of stuff. But any surprises stand out to you with any of the teams so far? Personally, I don't see anything that's out of the ordinary for the start of a season.
The only thing that surprised me is that Minnesota's undefeated, and
that could be,
That probably surprises me more than anything. I mean, other than that, nothing else really astounding sticks in my mind so far. But the fact that Minnesota is undefeated, I think they're 3-0, I believe. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't think they had a very good hockey team. They got rid of Stahl, and they didn't really bring in. They brought in a few guys, but no stars or anything. So I was surprised to see them get out of the gates as well as they have.
Well, again, with everybody with this in there, this sort of all divisional rule, everybody only playing themselves. The anomalies are going to sort of develop as we go along. So maybe we're seeing little signs of that with some of the teams that you're going to have to play as many as 10 times or 11 times or 9 times. So there's going to be some real fluctuations as far as the standings go and some of the movement we see with some of these teams. So but that's a good one to start off with. But everybody else seems to be falling in line as you would expect. And it's going to get a little tighter. And that brings me to this. We get a question today from Evan in Vancouver who asks, I like this one. Do you think it's fair that teams ride their backup goalies if they get hot early in the season?
Well, I guess you could look at that in a couple of different ways. One, obviously, if the guy's hot, you want to win, you play him. But at the same time, you don't want your number one guy sitting on the bench for a week and a half or 2 weeks or something like that. So, you know what? It's it is a good question because, as a head coach in the National Hockey League, what do? You don't want to get your number one guy angry at you, but at the same time, you want to win. And if your backup's hot, I don't know. In my mind, if I was a coach, I would ride the guy if he was winning.
Well, think about this, Squid. It's a fixed 56 game schedule. Every point stays in a division, as we're aware. It matters. You have no time to be worrying about feelings. You got to be worried about time of getting points. You got lots of time to have the feelings, after the fact. So somebody wins and the goalie is a little bit off, go with the guy that's winning. I mean, it's all fair game for and I mean, this goes from top to bottom, everybody.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think with a short season the way it is, I don't think there's any time to worry about anybody feeling angry or anything. And then again, with the expansion draft coming up too, and especially, okay, let's look at Toronto's situation, where you got Anderson's contract who's over at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. You're going to re-sign him. But if your backup's hot and he's winning, wins 2 or 3 games in a row, you're going to go back with Anderson or, I think in that situation, worry about the feelings at the end of the season and just go with the guys that are going to win you hockey games.
Well, that's what it's all about. It's all about the winning. And then speaking of which, we come to our historical moment in time for our podcast today. January the 23rd on this day in 1954, Toronto became the first team in league history to win its 800th game. They beat Detroit 4-1, but it also, here's something we hope we can see maybe going in the future with this hockey club is they also extended their team record home undefeated streak to 18 straight games. Point number 2, and 20 years later on the same day, a guy that we know and had on this show some time ago, rookie defenseman Boris Salming scored his first NHL career goal.
Cool. That's pretty cool. And I like the 18 wins at home in a row. We did that in South Carolina when I coached there. We won 18 straight games. It was split the end of one season into the next season, but nonetheless, we won 18 straight games at home.
That is, never mind. I don't care if you're playing house league. That is hard to do. No, think about that. You were there 18 in a row. And you got to imagine the players after a time are thinking about it.
Yeah, I think they probably are, but at the same time, I think you got to mix things up, do some different things, kind of try to keep their mind off of it and worry about what they need to do when they get out there as opposed to what the result's going to be. And I know I kept telling them, I said, guys, at some point this is going to end. And we all know that. This isn't going to go on for ever. So enjoy it and put everything you need to into it to make sure that it's a large number and not, something that ends at 10 or 11.
Well, let me throw this out. We're going off a little bit off where we were going to go the rail, but just as the coach in that period, running through that 18-game winning streak, did you do anything like you were trying to keep these guys grounded and let them know that this isn't going on forever to take advantage of it? But what did you do with the other coaches? Did you ever do anything like maybe shake the lines up just to say to you guys, just keep you on your toes, even though we're winning or something, just to let them know, boys, be prepared for the unexpected?
No, I never really tinkered with the lines or anything. I mean, of course, when you're winning that many games in a row at home, it's like, why would you change anything? But change up the routine a little bit on a game day, perhaps. Give them the day off and just go out and we were in South Carolina, so the weather was pretty good. So we'd go out and kick a soccer ball around the field outside the rink or something like that. Just kind of make things different and so that they don't get tired of the everyday same old all the time, and they stay fresh and refreshed, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, and not complacent. Complacency you don't want setting in, because that's dangerous. And that's where I was going with that was, did you must have that, and you answered the question because you were doing a few different things to keep it keep it sane and not out of the routine too extraordinary, but just enough to let them know, boys, keep the focus on the game.
Yeah. No, but there was no need to make changes to the lines or anything. The guys were all playing well. They were all clicking. The lines were playing well together. Just change up other things so that it's not, always on their mind that, oh boy, we've got to win tonight or else the streak's over. And, kind of get it out of their mind a little bit and let them do some different things and have some fun at the same time.
Well, that's good. Well, you could have shown the money ball, I guess, with the 21-game winning streak with Anomalies and showed them what they did there when the home run hit at the end to keep it going. Well, anyway, I think the listeners are tired of listening to us as usual for this part of the segment. Let's go and bring our guest on and see what Crusher has to say. Squid, our guest today, enjoyed a 14-year career, including 4 at the Maple Leafs. Originally drafted 120th overall by Boston, he won 3 Stanley Cups as a player with Edmonton, won one as assistant with Detroit, along with being requested as part of hockey's biggest trade, which we'll get into. Please welcome Mike Krushelnyski. Mikey, how are you doing here?
Gentlemen.
Now listen, how are you spending your days during this pandemic?
A lot of reading, a lot of TV, did some painting. I still have some painting to do, but we're quarantining. We're Ricky and I, we're getting old, so we can't be out there jeopardizing our future. So we still got a couple of years left to play. So we've literally been we've tried to be very careful, only go out for groceries or down on the waterfront. We'll go out for a walk. So you guys are in Niagara Falls. I think you're right about there.
Oh, I would be. Yes, you are correct.
Right there, I can see way in the distance. I can see the building from Niagara Falls.
Oh,
and you can see your hat through the window.
Yeah, wait.
Cool. I got the shutters closed, so. But it's pretty difficult. So I go for a walk every day. Joyce and I usually, unless she's babysitting our grandson, but every day try and get out for about an hour's walk, and that's about it.
Yep.
I don't, we're not doing a whole lot. I mean, when groceries are necessary, just go get what you need, and that's it. But,
now, Mikey. Mike, you had a couple years in the queue, putting up better than a point a game average throughout most of your time in 2 years there. When did pro hockey enter the equation for you as something you maybe want to do for a living?
Yeah, it never really did. I think in junior, the year before, I was playing junior B hockey in LaSalle, just locally, where I grew up, and got drafted, and then I remember we were playing for the junior Canadians where I was the defensive player. I think it must have got, close to 100 points. And Denny Savard was the offense. He got close to 200 points. But we were lucky back then. Got to play with a lot of fun guys, and it was just amazing at the draft to see how Montreal kept brushing Denny off, and they're like, "Nah, he's too small. He'll never do it." And we're just sitting there going like, "Man, you guys just don't know what you're passing up." And you watch him here because I think my first year we still played at the old Montreal Forum. So right after the Canadians would practice in the morning, and we would go on in the afternoon. So we were still out of that building. They gave us access. We can go watch the game whenever we wanted to. It really was great. And here, both of us, Denny and I, were both right under the Montreal Canadiens' noses, and they brushed both of us aside. So
well, it turned out okay for you, actually.
So, Mike, you played with the Trois Denis? Denny Savard, Tremblay, and Denny Sear, correct?
Denny Sear, yep.
Yeah. Played against them the year before. They were all rookies. And that was, you know what, that really surprised me that year in '79 when they didn't take Denny Savard with the number 1 pick. I mean, they took a guy who had a great career in the Western League in Wickenheiser, but he just didn't pan out in Montreal. And they took a lot of heat over that for not taking the local guy and the French guy over the bigger guy from the Western League. And unfortunately for them, it didn't work out. Wickenheiser, had some injuries and, just didn't really pan out, whereas Denny went on and had an unbelievable career.
And it was funny because they touted taking the bigger Denny Tremblay, who was literally just an up and down role player, a big guy, a big body, where Denny Sear was like you, Ricky. He was a shooter, the goal scorer. Yeah. And, it was just phenomenal because there were times where we would be watching the offensive zone and Denny would just literally be skating around the perimeter with the puck the whole time, forwards, backwards. And, we're just shaking our head. We're going like, and you're going to pass up on this guy. It makes no sense.
Well, it was really funny because I told this story before on the podcast that a friend of mine, Billy Garner, was in the Chicago camp at the time, and they maybe had one spot open on the club the year Savard showed up there, and Billy was a center. And the first day of training camp, he phoned his dad in the afternoon after the second skate, and he said, "I'll be going back to Moncton." He said, "Dennis Savard's too good." This was the first day of camp.
Yeah.
And he said he's going to be the number 1 center here before he can blink an eye. First day he said this, and look what happened.
Yeah.
Now you going to your first camp, Mike, with the Bruins, 6th round pick. What were your expectations, and what really went through your mind once you got there to your first camp?
I'm going to back up a little because I was at a hockey school. I was running a hockey school at the time. Yeah. And we were doing drills. And I remember my agent at the time, Bob Beal, he had come down to the glass and he's pounding on the glass. And I'm on the ice. I'm like, "Hold up, boys." So I go up there. I'm like, "What's up?" He goes, "Boston Bruins. You got drafted by the Boston Bruins." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, good. See it. Let's go, boys, skate." But, being their last pick that year, it wasn't even fathomable to me. Like, it was like, okay, we're just going to go to a training camp. But then when I got there and to literally be on the ice and Jerry Cheevers was still playing. So here I was a couple of years ago playing street hockey, watching all these guys, and there I am on the ice with them now. So between him and Wayne Cashman and Terry O'Reilly, Brad Park, it was a lot of fun.
So now you end up playing in the minors for a couple of years, or for actually basically 1 year. How was that when you got there? Like, what were some of the experience you take away from playing in the minors?
It's funny how we all break into the game with certain attributes. And it's funny how they're good enough to get you there or that far, and then good enough to get you into the league. And then all of a sudden you got some rocket scientist that's going to change your whole game and make you an NHL player. You just shake your head. But, like we're down in the minors, and I remember Johnny Wilson was the coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was one of the last guys to get sent down. So we get on the ice, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, black. There's no other blacks, right? So I go up to Johnny. I'm like, Johnny, where do I go? He says, fifth line centerman, no wingers. It's a tough act, kid. Real tough act. The next day, Al Secord and Tommy Songen get sent down. They're wearing black, and I go from the fifth centerman that's out of the line up to the number one line. So that was my one of the experiences. But I got to admit, like, it was a lot of fun. They taught you. You listen to the older guys. You'd see, who to go close to, who not to go close to, who to watch out. And I remember we were playing Adirondack, and Peter Mihalich was down there. And the face-off was just outside our blue line. And their defense lined up really wide, figuring he'd win it wide and they enter. And I'm looking, and I'm like, oh, man, all I got to do is punch it through his legs, and I got a straight breakaway. Bang, I punch it through, and I go down and score a goal. We're all celebrating. And then when we get back to the line, back to center ice for the face-off, Peter Mihalich, the opposition, taps me on the knee pads. He's like, that was a real nice goal, kid. I was like, holy, they even talk to you down here, the opposition. So, yeah, I was lucky. I had a lot of good experiences.
Fantastic. Well, you make the team for good in 1982. Now, you went from in junior, not even thinking about playing pro hockey. You go there with low expectations. You make the team. You have a great year in the minors. All of a sudden, you're going here and you're getting called up. Now your whole mindset has to possibly change. When you made the team finally, were you relieved? Were you expecting to make the team? Or were you just sort of overwhelmed? And really, who gave you the news? Did Cheevers talk to you and break
I think the previous year, the first year I played the full year in Springfield, but the second year, I thought I had a really great training camp, and I thought I deserved to stay there. And I remember them saying, you got to go see Harry. I was like, I got my meal money already. Like, so I go up and he's like, well, we're going to send you down. I'm like, really? I said, I'll be back. And, it's funny. Something kicks in. And fortunately, I was a dominant player in my second year as well. And I was leading the team in points in that. And I remember one of the old guys, what was his name? Andy. I can't remember. But we were a mix of Boston Bruins and Pittsburgh Penguins. And we got sent down with Lou Angotti as a coach. And actually that year, he put 11 of us in the NHL that year. And I remember Andy Spruce. And the game was getting close, and he goes like this, time out. And we all huddle in, and Lou's looking like, who called it? He didn't even call the timeout. Andy called the timeout. And we all get over there, and Lou's kind of preparing to say something about, let's try to set something up or this and that. And Andy just steps right in. He says, okay, cut the crap. Cruiser, just take the puck and put the puck in the net because we want to win the game and get out of here. I was like, okay. So fortunately, things, I had great guys, and, it was good timing. And
so now when you were playing with the Bruins, now you're in the National Hockey League, and going through, was the NHL as you imagined it? And maybe the second part of this, maybe not the first time through the league, but after going through the league a couple of times with the Bruins sweater on, did you sense that teams played you guys a little different. There was a different level of respect because of the original six sort of cachet they had, and plus the fact the Bruins were always good.
What I had learned was, yes, definitely teams played us differently, but it wasn't because we were an original six. It was because we were the Boston Bruins. Like,
Yeah,
everybody feared going
The
into
big bad
Toronto.
Bruins.
Or everybody feared when they went into Philadelphia. Philadelphia feared when Boston came into town. Like, it was,
Mhm.
I'm on the ice and I'm lining up against Bobby Clark. I've got Terry O'Reilly to my left, Wayne Cashman to my right, Stan Jonathan behind me on this defense, and John Wensick over here. and Bobby Clark would always drop the stick right by your nose to intimidate you. And as he does it, like, it clicks into my head. And I get up and I've got a smirk on my face. He's like, "What's so funny, kid?" I said, "My tough guys are way tougher than yours, and I'm going to grab you, and you know what's going to happen." And you could see him look over my shoulder. And he's like, "Uh-oh." And the puck was dropped, and he stepped back. I won the draw clean. It was the quietest game ever in the Philadelphia Spectrum, all on a bluff. You know? So, but
Yep, that's right. Squid.
Yeah, no, it's well, that was a tough place to play, and we didn't have that many tough guys back in Toronto back then, and going into Philly and Boston, it was tough because we didn't match up to them toughness wise, period. And we had a lot of guys that would just disappear on those nights, unfortunately, and so we couldn't go in and beat those teams in their buildings. I mean, at home, we were a different team, but still there was that, back then intimidation was big in the league. And the teams that had that toughness, they were hard to beat, whether it was in their building or it was at home, it didn't matter. I mean, when Mike just talked about the four guys right there, like four of the toughest guys that ever played in the National Hockey League on the same team, like, what do you, I mean, as a player, we didn't have that. And knowing that, I think a lot of guys figured, I'm not going to get too involved because if we end up into a brawl, we're not coming out on the right end of it.
And honestly, like, off the ice, those guys are the classiest gentlemen going. People that you really want to associate with, people that you don't want to be with. And on the ice, all they really wanted to do was play hockey. But there was always somebody on the other team that would start. Like, when you think about it, Boston was a small arena. Boston was a small rink. So they built accordingly. Big team.
Used to love the Boston Garden. If you got to the blue line, it was almost a scoring chance. 5 feet inside the blue line, it was a real good scoring chance.
Ricky, remember how we were always told, cross the blue line or cross center? Cross the blue line, let it go. Well, in Chicago, the old building, it was like cross center ice and let it go.
Well, especially when Tony Esposito was in goal because he couldn't see it from there. I just remember him standing there, and like, of course, he caught with his right hand, and he'd be just standing there, and then you'd shoot the puck from outside the blue line or center ice, and he'd be just standing there, and then if it hit him, he'd react to it. And if it didn't, it went in the net. So it was kind of neat. It was that was his last couple of years, and he was getting a little bit tough to see those long shots. In tough, he was still very, very difficult to beat. But from out long range, he couldn't pick it up until the last second. So
now, Mike.
Yeah, but like it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun because Rogie Vachon was there for that 1 year. So I had Rogie Vachon that I watched in Montreal as a kid. Guy Lapointe was there. We had Jim Schoenfeld, Peter McNabb, Terry O'Reilly, Donnie Marcotte, Ricky Middleton, who was phenomenal
Nifty.
as a player.
Nifty.
Yeah, he really was. So we were like, honestly, I thought we were one more forward, one more defense away from really competing, because you got to learn. You have to learn the NHL. And I tell this now, that the coaches, I don't care how long you've been in the league, you have to learn, how does your team react when you go to a certain city? How do your players react when they come and play in your building? The hockey's changed a little bit, but you still got to learn a little. But the players back then, like we seemed to have everything. All we needed was just a little bit, one more steam. And 2 years later, they end up trading. I think I went in after scoring 23 and 25 goals. I went in and asked Harry for a $5,000 raise. And he looked, he says, I'll get back to you. So on our wedding day, where we get married, we're down in the Bahamas on our honeymoon, and the phone rings. And I'm like, who's calling us here? So I pick up the phone. Hey, Charlie, how's it going? It was a reporter from Boston. He's like, Crush, how's it going? I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. It was very nice of you to call me on my honeymoon. He goes, you haven't heard, have you? I'm like, heard what? He goes, you've been traded. Over $5,000.
Well, let's pick up on that. I mean, you got the words that every hockey player dreads hearing, you've been traded. Now, in your case, though, you're moving to the reigning Stanley Cup champions. Now, unfortunately for you, you got stuck with some guy named Gretzky and some other unknown by the name of Yuri Curry you had to play with.
Yeah.
How did that all unfold? And when Sather spoke to you, obviously he must have called you at some point, maybe after your honeymoon or maybe after your wedding day. At some point he spoke to you. What was the message he gave you and why they went after you?
It was literally, hey, welcome. We were able to make a trade, and we think you're going to really be able to help out. And we look forward to you at training camp. And literally, that was it. And we got to camp in pretty good shape and fell on a line with Gretzky, and it seemed to just blend in like magic.
Yeah, it did. It worked.
Yeah, I would say so.
And then I remember, like, we had won the cup, and then on our exit meetings, I think I'd scored 43 that year, and Glenn goes, you think you can get 50? I was like, yeah, put me with the right guys, I'll get 50 for you. It was done. So all summer we're celebrating, having a good time. We go back to training camp. And back then we played a lot of games. Remember, Ricky? Like Edmonton, we played 11 exhibition games.
Yeah, we would play a lot back then, yeah.
Yeah. So
I think we usually played 9 or 10.
Yeah. So the games that I was in and playing with Gretzky, like 2 goals one game, 3 points the next game, another goal, another assist, 2 this, 2 that. And I'm like, man, I had like 15 goals in the first 7 games. I was like, I can't wait for the season to start. And before our home opener, we're going out. And Glenn would walk in and starting lineup, and he's staring at me, and I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, okay, we got Gretzky at center, and Charlie Huddy, and Paul Coffey, and Yari Kerr, and he's looking right at me, and he goes, and Esa Tikkanen, and he goes, Cruiser, I don't need you to score any more goals. I need you to shut people down. And I'm like, oh, there goes 50 goals. You know?
Oh,
Well, you end up winning 3 cups in Edmonton. Did you guys ever think the party was going to end?
No, because we thought we had everything. We had, size with Dave Semenko, Donnie Jackson, Lee Fogelin. They brought the toughness. We had Kevin McClellan, Marty showed up. We have Dade Hunter, Pat Hughes. back then, Mess was really mean with his stick. So, like, if it ever got out of hand, we never had to worry about that way. Speed.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't compete with the speed. Finesse, like shooters, we had everything. We had Furzy and Moger in nets. We had goaltending. We had everything. So, as far as we were concerned, like, keep winning.
So,
Well, you won
besides the
3.
obvious,
You won 3. That must have been incredible, though, to win. Like, what was that feeling like to be on a team that was that dominant and win 3 Stanley Cups? Like, you think of Henri Richard when I meet him, and he's got 11. He doesn't even have enough fingers for his rings.
No.
I have 0, and you win 3 in a row. How was that feeling?
You know what it was? The first time it was so exciting, obviously, because you had never done it before. I had only seen it on TV. As a kid growing up in Montreal, I would watch the Montreal Canadiens, and they won 5 in a row. So I just assumed you're playing the NHL, you're going to win the Stanley Cup every year. But, I get to Edmonton, and they had won the year before, so they knew how to win. I had to learn how to win. And I learned it that year. So the next years, it literally, the problem was so simple. It was, as long as everybody does their job, we don't need heroics out of anybody. And that's the way we played. Like, everybody was a threat to score. Everybody was, you're a third or fourth line checker, but put the puck in the net.
and you did.
Fortunately we did, yeah.
Well, now here's the thing. I mean, besides the obvious, the other teams are very, very special back in those days. What was it, the 2 things here, what was it that made them so special? You touched on it with some of the depth you had on the team, and the guys are very tough to play against and guys knowing their roles. But who are some of the guys on the club, fans or listeners may be surprised, that carried a lot of respect that weren't named Gretzky or Messier?
Well, it was always the third and fourth liners that did all the grunt work, so to speak, the tiring out. Whenever we played Toronto, it'd be like, don't let Ricky shoot. If Toronto's going to win, Ricky will beat us. So if we just shut him down, you're going to win the game. And most of the time that's what happened. But to put things in a perspective, like, Glenn had everything, and he could even punish you during game time. And I remember I was going through a bad spell. I think there was 2 games that I didn't score, and he's like, "You okay, Chris?" "Yeah." He goes, "Don't worry, I'll fix everything tonight." I was like, "Okay." So we go out for the game, and all of a sudden I'm playing with Messier and Anderson. And I was like, "Yeah, Mess and Andy, cool." Well, the puck is dropped. They're gone. I'm like, "Oh, I got to get to the net. I got to get to the net." Puck is turned over. Oh, I got a back check. Puck's turned over. I got to get to it. Forget this. I never touched the puck change. So during the game, he punished me by doing up and downs. Didn't even touch the puck. So
Trying to keep up with those guys.
And like Mess was so mean back then. He played so hard. Andy, well, the stick rule of you always have to be in charge of your stick, that was because of Glenn Anderson. He'd go flying down the wall and he'd beat guys, and periodically a defenseman would get his hip into him. And as Andy's coming down, he'd get the hip in, and he's going down, and on his way, it's like right in the back, right in that, over here or somewhere in the face. And you could see next time that defenseman's thinking, he's like, "I'll just push him wide, because I don't want to get that stick in the yap again." So there was that. There was the the 4-on-4, the coincidentals. You know,
yeah, they changed that because of Edmonton.
Yeah.
Edmonton couldn't wait, but we were experiencing that 4-on-4. Like I watched the 3-on-3 now overtime, man. It is so exciting. You know,
Well, now you're speaking about
it's all
Mike,
that way.
you're talking about Messier and about not being a mean player on the ice, and everybody knows about him. He's almost was defined as the ultimate warrior, which I hate that term, but the ultimate sort of leader and captain for a hockey club. What was it away from the rink or off the ice that he did that made him so special? Like he just seemed to do things that people just looked up to him wherever he was.
No, he was just a regular guy, and he treated everybody regularly. Here's a typical mess where we would always catch that 7:50 flight out of Edmonton, fly all day, and get into New York City at 5:00. And management would get off the bus, and we'd always sit there, and Mess would come from the back all the way to the front. And the doors would close, and he's like, "Okay, boys, it's 5:30, 6:00 in the lobby. 6:30, we're going to this bar for cocktails. 7:30, we're going here for dinner. 9:30, we're at this bar. You got somewhere to go? See you tomorrow. If not, that's our schedule. Let's go, boys." You know, so like, he took care of everybody. If you had friends or family, go see them. If you were a new kid in a big city, didn't know what to do, you hung with the boys. So I gotta admit, like, the hockey crew every hockey team was like that. They were always caring about you. You know, if things weren't going well after a game, you'd be in your room trying to figure things out, and there'd be a knock on the door, and like, "What are you doing? Come on, let's go relax," you know? So I think Ricky and I were very lucky to play in the NHL. A lot of great guys, you know. I can't say enough good things about it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because a gentleman not too long ago, maybe about a year ago, asked me, he said, "How many guys did you play with in your career?" And he said, "How many players did you hate that you played with?" I said, "Well, wait a minute." I said, "Hate, first of all, is a pretty strong word." And I said, "I can count on one hand the guys that maybe I didn't get along with, or, you know, just didn't agree with all the time, or whatever it is." And I played with a lot of guys for over 14 years. And to say that there was only 5 guys or less is pretty remarkable when you think about it. So that's how, you know, how hockey players are, especially at the National League level. I mean, it's just incredible how selfless the players are.
Well,
Mike,
Ricky and I. Okay, so Ricky and I know, but Mike, how many guys have you run into that you don't like?
Not very many. Every guy's the first. Hockey players are the best in the world. They're the first guys to step up anytime we needed any kind of help with anything to do with any of our charity events. Never selfish about stepping up and giving their time or whatever they could do to help. And it's just a different breed of athlete, and they're forever giving back, always giving back. And don't forget where they came from. And that's one of the biggest things I've always noticed. Now, speaking of which, in the summer of '88, you're enjoying your 3rd cup. And a month before camp opens, you're a part of one of the biggest trades in history, if not the biggest trade in history. And you're requested to be a part of the trade along with Marty McSorley by the guy who moved, and that was, of course, Wayne Gretzky to LA. How involved were you in that? Or were you involved? Or were you brought up to date? Or were you aware of what was going on all summer as that was taking place?
Well, let me tell you what Mike told me, okay, before he tells you,
Okay.
was that the trade was for him and they threw in Gretzky and McSorley. That's what he told me one time. Might have had a few beers or something in him when he told me, but it was pretty funny to hear that from Mike.
Yeah. So Gretz went for the 5 first-round draft picks. McSorley went for Jelena. I was the guy that went for the 15 million. I think Marty and I altered that story. But it's funny, Mike. Like just 2 days prior, I was again running a hockey school, and I've got all these reporters that are coming up to me asking me, like, "Oh, what do you think? Gretzky gonna be traded?" I'm like, "What are you smoking? Like, you could trade me, you could trade McClellan or Hunter or Tikkanen, trade Gretz, trade Canada. Like, what? I don't get it." 2 days later, we're off to LA.
So
unbelievable.
Mike, do you think that that's probably something that like changed the league and changed what people thought and GMs thought about? Like, in other words, okay, if Wayne Gretzky can get traded, anybody can get traded. And, you do see some bigger names getting traded in the National League nowadays as opposed to you would have back then, because if you were that good, you just never left. And I think that trade kind of changed how everybody looked at things.
Yeah, but it was just a monetary deal. It was Gretz for $15 million, plain and simple.
No, didn't they get who's a young kid they got? Carson?
Jimmy Carson.
Yeah,
Jimmy
Carson. But it was still $15 million, Ricky. That's all it was. Pocklington needed money.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
And
but I'm saying the fact that they actually moved him, whether it was for money or draft picks, whatever the case might be, the fact is the best player in the National Hockey League at the time got traded. And I think that changed the way a lot of people looked at things and said, well, if Wayne Gretzky can get traded, then I guess anybody can.
You see, you look at it that way, and I look at it as hockey really is a business, and it's just a money-making venture. And I don't even know if certain teams, I know for a fact certain teams don't know how to win, but I don't even know if they want to win. That's scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, back in the 80s too, you're right. I mean, the owners controlled everything. I mean, like we've talked about, like many times, you and I, they had Eagleson in their back pocket. They ran the league. I mean, we had nothing. I mean, we had no say in, what took place, what was going to happen. We'd go negotiate CBAs and Eagleson would just go off on his own and come back with nothing. And that was kind of the way it was. So, yeah, I can understand, I guess, that part of it is that the owners controlled everything, and Pocklington wanted money. He needed money, and that was the only way he was going to get it.
Well, it's really funny because
I think as the trade as harsh as it was on Gretz, and as what's the right word? Not degrading, but insulting that you would even trade a player of that. I think it worked out to everybody's best interests, even better than had expected. I mean, because then, going to LA, all of a sudden LA was on the map in the hockey world, not just a vacationing place. And,
Edmonton won another cup
2 years later.
After that.
Yeah. And then like we had black tie affairs. It was just a great time to be there. I remember on one side of the building, this 30-story building, you had Magic Johnson in an LA Laker uniform, and then you had Gretz in the LA Kings uniform, and like it was exciting times back then,
Well, what was it like for you moving to LA? So let's pick up on that. So you get traded, you're moving to LA, and you're going to basically a new owner, new sort of genre with the team, with colors and the new sweaters. You've got a celebrity base that you're going to tap into. It's Hollywood, all that kind of stuff. How was your mindset going in? And you're moving with the greatest hockey player in the world.
Two things. Like, I'm going to play hockey. So the first thing I do, and we were negotiating, trying to get a little bit more money. And I remember telling my agent, I said, I'll go anywhere but LA. and it was only because every trip for LA was a road trip. Toronto, Montreal, you're back that night. New York, Buffalo. LA was a 2-week road trip every. And then as soon as I find out, I hang up and I either go to the paper, I must have went to the hockey news because I'm looking. And I'm looking at the lineup and I'm like, oh, Barry Beck, Mike Allison, Larry Robinson. I was like, Bernie Nichols, Gretz, Marty, myself, we can compete. I'm going. Because it was like, let's go win down there. And unfortunately, we were an older team. John Tonelli, these were players that I used to hate playing against. They were so hard to play against because no matter what you did, that guy just still kept coming. And unfortunately, we had Robbie Fatorik.
I was going to bring him up. That's my next question.
As a coach, yeah. And don't get me wrong, Robbie, when people ask me, good coaches, bad coaches, I put Robbie Fatorik into the good coaches category. But unfortunately, we were an older team. So he's out there skating patterns and this and that. And I'm like, Robbie, just tell Larry Robinson, he's got 5 cups. He knows what to do. We had a teacher when all we needed was a dictator. Go, do, power play, penalty kill. The player, we older players, we already knew what to do. Let us go. Don't hold us back. And unfortunately, and Robbie was great, but he was always trying to teach. And
well, the thing
I say that wrong. It didn't come out properly, but
Well, yeah, let's pick up on this part of it then. It was the teacher. He certainly played the part wearing the cardigan every day, looking like Mr. Rogers behind the bench with the cardigan on for first off, like that, yeah. Number one. But then number two, the story is always that he seemed to be trying to do things his own way to let everybody know who was in charge. Now, there could be a couple of things that sort of go along with that. Number one, the thought was, who's running this hockey club, Wayne Gretzky or him? There seemed to be decisions made that maybe are not always in the best interest of the hockey club. But this guy, he's maybe under some pressure to produce right away because anything less than the Stanley Cup is almost a failure because now you have 99. So he's probably feeling a little bit of this, but there seemed to be this struggle that was going on between him and the room. Is that a fair statement?
Robbie was a hard worker, honest player. And that's what he expected out of the team. And maybe prior to whoever he was coaching, he never had a great player in Gretz. And, now we're learning, man, you want to win, you got to get your best players on the ice. At the end of the game, who do you want shooting? Ricky or myself? You want Ricky shooting the puck. So there was that, we're all even. And I remember we were in Detroit one time. And the puck was kind of come to our defenseman. And he released his man off the wing and he broke, figuring Dean Kennedy is going to get the puck. No, it was Bubba. Barry Beck was going to get the puck and it's straight up the middle and Gretzky got a breakaway and we got a scoring chance. Well, the thing hops over his stick. And Gretzky's got to turn back, double back, and he's chasing, and his man ends up scoring. And he breaks his stick over the glass, and the period ends, and we all go in. So, drop my gloves off. I go back to the washroom. I come out, and I see Gretzky's got his head down. I'm like, hey, you okay? Like, Crush is going to bench me. I'm like, yeah, right. So I go into the medical room and do something there and come out. Gretz has still got his head down. I'm like, you okay? This Crush, he's going to bench me. I'm like, good, I'm going to play more. As we're going out on the ice, Gretz is still, I'm like, Gretz. I go, come on, he's not going to bench you. So we were matching lines. And Gretz, myself, I can't even remember who, I think Tonelli were supposed to go out. And he goes, Cruz, take center with McSorley and Tonelli. You're next. And I'm like, wow, he benched Gretz. I was like, okay, one shift, one rotation, no big deal. Second rotation, third rotation, fourth rotation, and Gretz is just sinking away, right? And I put my glove up to I cover my face, so the camera, and I'm like, Robbie. And he comes behind me. I'm like, you got to get Gretz on the ice. Well, he shut up. I'm like, just get him on the ice. Got him on the ice. Well, anyways, we end up losing the game and showering, getting on the bus, and I'm waiting. Now I'm curious. Now the coaching part has got me. I'm like, what? So I'm waiting for Robbie. Everybody gets on. Robbie's the last guy. I'm like, hey, what were you thinking? It's like, a player of that magnitude should never show that he's pissed off. And I'm scratching my head. I'm like, man, you should be lucky a player of that magnitude even cares. Go figure.
Now, Mike, your relationship with Gretzky, describe that. And while you're on that, in your view, just from a hockey standpoint, maybe, what about him, besides his talent, made him so special?
Gretz always had the right answers, and he always treated everybody with respect, whether you were the president of the United States or the towel boy.
Yeah.
Gretz always put you on the pedestal. And, it's funny. Back then, you don't realize it, but, man, did he ever handle the press at the age of 18, 19, 20? All the way to, I watched that Something for Joey, and Gretz had the prelude, the intro, and he just spoke phenomenally. And and that's the way he was. And I think a lot of guys, especially like Crosby and all the leaders now, they used to watch that. And Gretz was so good, and he's always, so eloquent with his words, and you can always tell that whenever Gretz is talking, it's coming from his heart.
Yeah, compared to now, it seems like these guys are almost taught what to say, and it's kind of the same thing every time they're interviewed. And for the most part, there's a lot of the best players in the league. They hardly say anything. If you watch, and it's not an attack on anybody, but if you watch Crosby's any of his interviews, they're rather boring. Because you're not getting anything out of them. But Wayne was really good. Wayne would explain things, and he would talk to the press. He had a good relationship with them, and you're right. It's the guy was a magnificent player, but he was good at pretty much anything he put his mind to.
Yeah, but like even he's got his camp down in Vegas, and I get invited down, and the wife and I we get off the plane, and the second we see Gretz, he's like, "Oh, how you doing?" And like it's your family. Like he was just the greatest of guys, and still is.
So give the listeners something that they may be surprised to hear about Wayne. Maybe one of his likes or dislikes or superstition or an unusual habit that he had, maybe on the fun side.
It was, like I said, he was just a normal guy, nothing, like to crack the odd joke, loved his ping pong, but it was competition for Gretz. Like we're all just, fooling around and this and that, and Gretz has got to win. We're winning 5-1, and, a couple of guys laid off, and they're like, and he's like, hey, we're here to win. Like it wasn't as though you want to try to embarrass the other team. It's like, go and do your job, and like we all learned, go do your job. But I remember, what was it? Koff had a great night, like 2 goals, 2 assists, but he needed 1 more point to break the record. And Gretz is like, so? And Koff's like, yeah, what? So what? He's like, we're going to do it. Like he would force you to do things, and it was like he had that persona, that will to get the best out of you. That's what he really did. He really brought out the best in everybody, and that's what made him so famous.
That's
It's a funny story about Gretz. In one of the All-Star games I played in, Johnny Garrett was a goaltender, and he was playing outstanding. And the guys were thinking, okay, he might win the car, like he might get the MVP of the All-Star game. And I remember Lanny and a couple other guys, and then all of a sudden Gretz just turned it up halfway through the game, and I don't know what he ended up with, like 4 goals and 3 assists or something, something crazy. And then every time he scored or got an assist, you'd hear Lanny yelling at Chiefs, there goes one of the wheels, there goes the other wheel. Sure enough, Wayne won the car.
Well, like he was a great player, but he was just one of the boys, and he, like I said, he put you on a pedestal, and it obviously meant a lot to me, and I'm sure it meant a lot to everybody.
That's fantastic. And every good little party comes to an end. And in 1990, you get moved again. You move to Toronto. You come when this team is in sort of a phase of respectability. You moved. Tom Watt, I believe, was coaching when you arrived. Pat Burns then was brought in. So just take us through that period. First off, getting traded back to a team such as Toronto, and maybe what was going on with that hockey club and the Pat Burns influence. Now, was he as influential on that team as people make out to be, or was he just the fortunate to be the sort of bearer of some great trades by Cliff Fletcher, meaning getting guys like yourself and of course the Gilmore trade, which turned everything around?
Yes, I would agree with you that I think he was more finding his way in coaching, and the players that were brought in by Cliff, in my eyes, I thought, we were going the right way, and maybe we needed a little bit of. Well, in my eyes, I love Tom Watt. I think we would have had more success with Tom Watt, because Tom Watt was a teacher. John Muckler was a teacher, as in we were waiting second round. We had like 10 days off, and everything was like, okay, we're going to be playing that team, and left side, left side, left side. So we bottle up the left side. Well, after the first period, we're losing 2-0. And Muck walks in and he's like, forget what I said, forget what we practiced, right side. And we're like, really? We end up losing that game 4-2, but we end up winning the next 4 games straight because Muck was smart enough to catch it and teach us to do something differently. Where I think Tom Watt was like that. Unfortunately, he was there my first year, and I really enjoyed him. He was a student of the game. He was a teacher. But I think they just gave up hope on him. So, but let me back up before the trade. So we were on the plane. I'm sitting next to Tonelli, he's reading the paper, and I don't know what I'm doing. But he's looking, he's like, Toronto, looking to make a trade. Experienced centerman, team out west. And he's like, that's you. He's like, former goal scorer, now an all-around player. It's like, that's you. I'm like, come on. So I turn around, I'm like sorry, I'm like, Mark, go talk to Gretz. So he goes up, comes back, not going anywhere. I'm like, see, 2 plane rides later, they made the trade in the air. I'm coming to Toronto. So that's how that happened.
That is hilarious.
But yeah, like, you what, like, it's always easy to look back, but when I was here, yeah, we were missing a few pieces, but I'm looking and I'm like, wait a minute, you got a talented kid in Gary Lehman, a 50 goal scorer, and you're getting rid of him. You got Scott Thornton, who went on to play I think 21 years in the NHL.
Long time, yeah.
I was there. I was brought in to replace him, and I'm like, why are you replacing an old guy when it's right there in front of you? Al Iafrate. Man, that guy was an animal. He blocked shots. He shot the puck harder than anybody. Gave his heart. They trade him away, and they're trading guys away, and I'm like, what the heck are you guys doing? You know, like, so I should have been in management back then. But, you know, like it was as though we weren't doing the right things. And then fortunately, Cliff pulled off that big trade that brought Dougie and 4 other guys here. And we all know the rest of that.
Just picking up on that, with the trade comes in and Gilmore comes here, and I'll ask you the same thing of him as I asked of Gretzky. What was it besides his obvious talent, where he was probably the best player in the National Hockey League for those couple of years where you guys had real success, that made him different than other guys?
You know, Dougie just was, what, 5'9", 160 pounds, soaking wet. But he played like he was 10 feet tall and 400 pounds. Like, you couldn't stop him. He was relentless. He cared for the guys. And like every game he played, he left everything on the ice for that game, for that sweater. You know, we just didn't have enough support around him or enough luck to beat Kerry Fraser.
You know, the one thing I'll say about Dougie is that, you know, when he came into the league, he was a checker. Like, he was a third line centerman in St. Louis. His job was a shutdown role. And he had to learn how to do that, because he was an elite player in junior as well in Cornwall. And but when he got to the National Hockey League for 3, 4, maybe even 5 years, he was a defensive centerman on the third line. And I think that in itself, I mean, you knew he had the talent, obviously, but I think learning how to play at that end of the rink and be responsible, and then all of a sudden you go to Calgary, then on to Toronto, and then all of a sudden you're let go. And they'll say, yeah, just go and play. You're a top centerman. I think that kind of, you know, helped them a lot, was that early teaching of being a real responsible player, in my mind anyway. Because I remember playing St. Louis.
And I know when I played in Toronto, I didn't have that confidence, you know, to be a dominant player when you're on the ice, to, you know, take the puck and go. You know, and I attribute that to coaching. Like, the coach has got to install confidence into everybody, and you've always got to do, you know, everybody's got a certain role, but I don't know. I
know what you're trying to say, and I got to agree with you that coaches have to realize the guys that they have to kind of put their foot on, and there's other guys that they got to come and just say, hey, just go play your game. You know, we know how good you are. We know what you're capable of. Just go play the game, and you know, and leave the guy alone. And you know, I had my best year in the National Hockey League when Mike Nikolak was our coach, and not because Mike had great systems or anything. He didn't have anything, but he talked to me, and he called me in certain times, and we wouldn't even talk necessarily about hockey that much. But he always said to me, just play your game. Just go, do what you do best, and don't worry about it. You know, so, I mean, that gives you confidence, and that, you know, made me a better player. It was like, okay, he's counting on me, and I don't want to let him down, you know, because he's given me the clearance to go and play my game. I don't want to let him down at all. And I think that makes you a better player when you have that mindset that you know that the coach believes in you.
Well, that, and like now that we're going to get into it, you can't win with, you know, 1-2 lines.
No.
There were, you know, when Mario came in, okay, maybe you could have won with just Mario's line. But as the years went on, people started to learn, and it was like, you need a 4 line, you know? And maybe that's what it was. It was like it was hard playing some games where you're only playing, 4, 5, 6 minutes. Like, what do you expect? Like, what really do you expect out of that player? And if they get if your big boys get shut down, like there were a lot of games in Edmonton where times were tough, and the third line would get the first goal, and then the fourth line would get the second goal, and then the big guns, just piled it on. But like,
yeah, I know. I was on the other end of that many nights.
Certain times you had to rely on the third and fourth lines, and I don't think third and fourth lines, when in my time here, were relied on. It was like, if we're going to win, that's the way we're going to win, and that's the way it is.
Well, listen, you know what? Just on that line, that all starts like any good business or anything that's run today. It starts at the top. So you now played for 2 organizations from the original 6. I always like to go back because of the history, and these teams have some fortitude going back. You coached in one with Detroit, so you played 3 of the original 6. You played another good hockey culture in Edmonton. LA was turned on with Gretzky and all that, so you had everything going for you. It's been said that what I like to get from you, Mike, is sort of the attitude teams and organizations had towards winning and losing. Boston, now, when we had Tommy Ferguson on with Dan Daru, Ferguson, when he came from Boston to Toronto, like they lose 2 games in Boston, and Harry Sinden would be losing his mind and ready to trade half the team. And Daru said it was the same attitude in Montreal. And they came to Toronto, they didn't win for 6 games, and he thought, we're going to get killed today. Nothing was said. Now, that started probably from the owner at that time of Harold Ballard. So the Bastic owner led all that. And when you were there, it was a different owner in Toronto. But walk us through some of the organizations you played for and just sort of that approach. No team wants to lose, but there's definitely a different culture as far as winning and losing goes, if you know what I mean.
I was lucky because Boston, it was still old school. Even though we never competed for the cup, in our minds, we were right there. Edmonton, we were able to get it done. LA, 2 years in a row, you could see where we're still short a player or two. We beat in the playoffs, first round of playoffs, we beat the defending Stanley Cup champions. We just ran out of steam. We come to Toronto, it's a rebuilding process. We make it all the way to the semis. And then in Detroit, I end up losing my last game to New Jersey. So I was lucky where I was always on a team that was competing for the cup. When you look back at it, where
must be
unfortunately, Ricky was
on the receiving end of the bad side.
And now that I've been there, done it, the GM is most important. And in the same pause, it's the coach that is the most important because he's got his finger on the pulse. And he knows exactly who's on that night and who's not. But in the summer is where the GM, the coach will say, well, we got to get rid of that piece, and that piece. And I don't always mean by, I need a 50-goal scorer, I need a first-line center, and a right-shot defenseman. It's just pieces of the puzzle. And then the GM has got to put, if he's got belief in the coach, he's got to, put belief in him that, hey, we got rid of that, and I replaced it with what you wanted. You got rid of that, and I replaced it with what you wanted. Now go and win the cup. And it's honestly, it's that simple. But for some reason, it's really hard for a lot of teams. I have no idea.
Well, you can see that in Toronto when they've put the turn in Toronto has come since the change in management, and it starts right at the top, as I said, and you can see it filter through the organization and the way they handle things, the attention to small details, and you talked about it at Edmonton, how it filtered through, and even Boston, the way they carried it on. So so on those lines again, we are just got a few minutes left. And Crusher, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Who was the best captain you ever played for with?
Pardon?
The best captain you ever played with? Tough question, because you had a couple of them.
The best captain. Wow.
And maybe not the obvious guy, maybe a Gretzky, or maybe somebody who led you, as maybe it could have been an alternative, but just somebody as a good leader.
I can't even remember my captain in Boston. Ricky, I need some help. Who was captain? Was it Wayne Cashman? Terry O'Reilly? I can't remember. O'Reilly, yeah. O'Reilly
was it Brad Park?
No, I think it was Terry O'Reilly, and like
Cashman.
Wayne was an assistant.
No, I think it was Cashman.
Yeah, but everyone, Cash was an assistant, but
no, Terry O'Reilly was the captain. Yes, I do remember that.
Yes, and
early in the '80s, and then
one of the greatest guys, one of the oldest guys. He would be on the ice, the last guy to get off the ice with the puck, because he competed so hard. His love for the game, he was just phenomenal. And then I go Gretz, and we come here, we have Dougie, and then I go to Stevie Yzerman. So it's like, again, I hit the jackpot.
So, okay, who is one of the, make it light then. Who is one of the biggest pranksters you ever played with? I heard Gilmore was prankster, the funniest guy, like in pulling jokes and getting guys, keeping dressing rooms loose.
Keeping dressing rooms loose? I don't know, but prankster? I think I can fall into that category a little bit.
You're one of them.
I was one of them.
Who's one of your victims?
Along with McSorley, we'd be shoe shining guys and cutting socks. It was all in fun. It wasn't mean. It was all done in fun. But some of the stuff, I can't even tell you some of the stuff that was done. Like taking a number 2 in a guy's skate.
Yeah. But you mentioned Marty, Mike, and I remember like every alumni game when he would come in the room, I'd be hiding everything so that he wouldn't get at any of my stuff, because I know I've heard about him and what he's capable of doing. So when he walked in that room, if I see him come in the room, I'm hiding things in my bag and everything so that there's nothing that he can touch.
But it was the here's a good one that was pulled on me. It was the trade deadline, and we had one more day to go through it. And I walk into practice and all my equipment is gone. I'm like, nah. And then I look at Marty and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, Cruiser. I was only joking. Put the stuff back, Marty.
Well, there was guys like Ty Doman. They said you never want to cross Ty because he just never took getting even. It was even for the rest of your life that he'd be chasing you. Curtis Joseph would avoid all of it because he just didn't want to be on the receiving end all the time. And Gilmore apparently was rumored to be quite the jokester himself in getting guys.
Yeah. I think from what I hear from our alumni games, I think that Matthew Barnaby, Buffalo crowd, I think they were a little goofy as well.
Well, Rick can talk about that. He was there in Buffalo.
Yeah, but not when he was there. Not when Barnaby was there. He came a long time after me. But no, Buffalo is a great place to play. And it's funny you mentioned that because we had Clint Malarchuk on recently, and that year that I got traded to Buffalo, we had one of the better teams in the league, and our record wasn't great. But Ted Sater made some mistakes, I think, and they made a couple of trades like Lindy Ruff. Who else? There was a couple other guys that they traded. Like you're talking about exactly that they traded these guys that we really needed in order to win. And when I think back at some of those years that I played, that was one of them in Buffalo, was the year I got traded there. We had a heck of a team, but then all of a sudden guys are getting, traded out, and those are guys that we needed in order to win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it was frustrating.
a lot of times good coaches will know those guys, because the players certainly do.
Well, the
The only
players
good
usually
thing-
do, don't they?
The only good thing that came out of that was Lindy wore 22 and I was wearing 12. So when he got traded to the Rangers, I got to wear 22. So that's the only good thing that came out of it, because we needed a Lindy Ruff on our team if we were going to advance in the playoffs. And there was a couple other guys that they traded that year too. I can't remember who they were, but they were really team guys that we really needed in order to get over the hump. And unfortunately, I guess they didn't see that we needed those guys and move them on.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, we want to, we've taken up a lot of your time, and we can't thank you enough for joining us today. You've provided us with some great insights. We didn't get a chance to get into the coaching. Maybe when we get further down the season, we'll get you back on for a talk about the coaching. You and Squid can exchange some stories from behind the bench. You have a cup ring though, but he's got you on that one though, Squid.
He's got me, but you know what? I like to think we're both pretty good, because both of our boys went the college route. They were smart. I like to think that we had something to do with that. And they both got their schooling, and then they got to play some pro hockey. And I know Mike's son, Alexander's in the agency business now in Chicago. My son is still playing, and he's an assistant coach, a player assistant. But they both have their education in their pockets. And, I think that, look, now mind you, college wasn't an option really when we started in 79, 80, back then. Very few players were making the NHL in college. So it's a lot different now, obviously, but I'm glad that both our boys got their education and they're doing well.
Fantastic.
And it's funny you say that, because literally I took off because I remember the junior Canadians were going to draft me. And they said, hey, come and see a game. And I went and saw a game, and I was like, holy jumping, these guys are men. They're going to kill me. I'm not ready for this. So I ended up taking the scholarship and running down to St. Louis to get away from the juniors. And it's funny you say that. I think by Christmas, the goal was, I want to be the opening faceoff. I want to be taking it. And we were in Air Force, and I'm taking the opening draw. And things are going well, but all of a sudden my ice time is just slowly diminishing. And by Christmas, I'm barely even playing. Well, the junior GM shows up, and he's like, we still need a big centerman down the middle. I'm like, parents are coming in next week. I'll get back to you. I remember talking to my dad and running the story. He's like, go talk to the coach. And I'm like, Coach, what's going on? He goes, you've got 4 years ahead of you. You're a freshman. I was like, really? Bye. And I went back. And that was the year I got drafted. And I saw my old captain from St. Louis University, Doug Butler, who was 24 years old, going to his first Bruins camp as well. So you're right, Ricky. The guys weren't going to college to make the pros back then.
Yes, that's for sure. Well, guys, Mike, again, we want to thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully get through this pandemic like all the rest of us and get back out and doing some things and some enjoyable things. And you can play on the wing with Squid there, and you can set him up and he can bang a few in for you.
I'll be counting on him.
Well, Squid, Crusher, he's certainly an entertaining guest, got lots of stories. He had quite a career for a guy who really didn't have any aspirations to play pro hockey at one point.
I got to tell you, he was a good player and big guy. I mean, 4 rings. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I just can't fathom it anymore, because I see we're playing all these alumni games. Guys are coming in with 3 rings, 4 rings, 3 rings, 2 rings, and I have 0. So, but no, Mike's a good guy, and he was a heck of a player, and but he's a gentleman, and we have a lot of fun together.
Well, you can see too that his observations were sort of targeted at certain teams where that there is weakness, and maybe some of the coaching at some of the decisions being made in LA. You could see there was definitely a bit of a strife there between the players and the coach. And even in Toronto, where, well, you know what the old line goes is, you know, would the coaches get too much credit when they win and not enough when they lose, and so on and so forth. Same with the players. And, you know, maybe Pat Burns, you know, he was listen, you got to have good luck to, you know, have good luck and good management seem to go together. And, you know, he was the recipient of some good trades and some good maneuvering on Cliff Fletcher, who maybe doesn't get enough credit for what he sort of tried to attempt to do back in those days. And you could imagine if they had a good owner back in the time, who really knew what he was doing, how things might have turned out differently. I read a story today about Phil Esposito when he was with the Rangers and he took over as a general manager job. He claims that he was in the running for Gretzky for the Rangers. And their attitude was, what do we want him for? What do we want him for? They said. Well, the Rangers are always kind of rumored as one of the teams because big money. But he was, if they'd written the check the way he worded it, he could have been right in the running with them. Wow. But what do we need him for? There, but... Well, what do we want him for? The Gardens are sold out. We don't need sell any more tickets. And what do we need this guy for? And the attitude sort of was, get this team to the final, lose the last game, then we don't have to pay any more money and everybody's happy. It's kind of that.
Well, when you talk about it, like listening to Mike talk about Robbie and everything else in LA, for instance, like there's a situation where sometimes you just have to get out of your own way. And you know, you realize what you have, and you kind of just have to get out of your own way and just say, okay, boys, just go and do your job. Play the game the way you can play it, and try not to be too technical or, you know, like benching Wayne Gretzky because he, you know, somebody pinched and he was going the wrong way and he didn't catch the guy. Like, I mean, those are things mistakes that guys make because they get in their own way. They just can't seem to get out of their own way. And, you know, I think I had a few guys like that coaching me too.
You had a few. There's been a few. Well, he breaks a stick and he gets benched. I mean, because he cared. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, those are, and again, in that dressing room, how many Stanley Cup rings were in that room? 15 or 16 or something with guys like Tonelli and Robinson and Gretzky and anyway. I mean, something.
And Mike.
Marty and Crush, like all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, well, anyway, we want to thank Mike very much for joining us today. Guys, watch for Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan. We'll be making some announcements throughout the week for our next guest coming up. Send us any of your questions that you'd like to throw at us. We want to thank Evan today for giving us that good question about the goalies. And we'll be back at you again next week. Look for us on all the social media networks. We'll be out there and talk to you guys soon.